Alright, welcome back. Second semester, Autocad. We're going to get started today learning a new tool. And I've just been practicing a little bit here for myself. I'm going to delete these, start from scratch here. This is just a new drawing, so I'll just start a new drawing. And before we get started, I'm going to create a few layers. So that, again, you're going to go into Layer Properties, click on this little button here, and we're going to create a layer called Helix, H-E-L-I-X. We're also going to create a layer called Threads. Another layer, we're going to name this one Bolt. And then our last layer is going to be labeled, oops, I want to rename this layer Nut. Alright, now I'm going to just determine some different colors for each of these layers so they stand out on the dark background. So I'm changing the colors of each of the new layers. Make one yellow here, and one more. Alright. Now we're ready to draw. So I'm going to close my layer properties panel, and I'm going to change to have the current layer be Helix. So this is the new tool we're going to learn to use today. So a helix is basically a spiral, and you find the tool in the draw group here, but you have to it's hidden. You have to click on this little arrow, and the tool is found right here, or you could always type it in. So Helix is what we're going to learn how to use. So now I'm on my Helix layer. I just clicked on the Helix tool, so now I'm ready to draw. I'm going to just change my view a little bit, and also, yeah, let's just leave it that way. Since a helix is not a 3D, it's just a wire. I'm going to stay in 2D wireframe for now. It'll be fine. So there's three things to determine. I think actually maybe four things for a helix. First thing is determining a radius. So how this is going to be a circular spiral. So it's a circle. I'm going to specify just a random start point, and it's asking me to specify the radius. I'm going to specify a radius of 10. So that means the overall diameter would be 20. And then that's the starting diameter. And you don't need to draw this yet, so you just pause and watch for a second. But if you wanted to have either a smaller or a larger ending radius, you could do that. So let's say I want to have a radius of 5 ending points. So that's a lot smaller from the beginning. That's half. So we've determined two things: the starting radius, ending radius. The next thing you could choose is which direction you want to draw your helix. That would be the axis end point. I just chose that from the menu down here. So if you wanted to draw your helix sideways, you could choose to do that in the XY plane, or I'm just going to stick with the Z plane here, straight up and down. So that would be the third thing, which direction you want to draw your helix. The fourth thing would be the height of your helix. I'm going to specify 100. Again, you don't have to do this. I'm just showing you an example. So if you wanted your helix to have a different end radius from the start radius, so this one tapers off and gets smaller towards the top. So that's the basic drawing order for creating a helix. So let's get started with the one we're actually going to use for our nut and our bolt. So if you've already started drawing, you can just leave it there. I'm going to start by determining just a random start point here, and the radius is going to be 10. enter, that's the starting radius. And for our bolt, it's going to remain 10. So I'm going to type in 10. So it's just going to basically form a spring here. It's not tapering. And then I want the height to be 100. So my spiral here has a radius of 10, which would mean the diameter is 20, and an overall height of 100. So this is my helix, and if I were to create threads on this, there wouldn't be very many turns. So let's say I want more threads on this. You can always edit a helix afterwards by accessing the properties. So to do that, we're going to just select the helix, and if you don't already have this visible, I think you can add that up here. It's pretty easy. So you click on this little down arrow thing, looks like an eject button, and you can make properties visible. That way it's easy to find next time. You can always just type in properties down here if you're not sure where to find it, and you're looking for this little symbol here, and click on the properties to open this window. Alright, so here we can see that we determined our overall height to be 100. You could click on any of these things to change them. So we don't want to change the height, but we do want to change the number of turns. Right now it's set to 3. So 100 height divided by 3 gives you a turn height of 33.3333. That is the distance between each turn. So the distance between this here and here would be 33.33. So I can either determine a new turn height, if I knew specifically how tight I want my spiral to be, or I could just determine the number of total turns. So let's say I wanted my turn height to be 5 millimeters. So I'm going to put in 5 here and enter. Oop, that changes the overall height. So that's not what we want. Let's undo that. Alright, so here we have our properties. So we don't want to do that. We want to change the number of turns instead. So if I wanted a turn height of 5, that would mean my number of turns would need to be 20. So 100 divided by 20 would be 5. So here I have 20 different turns. The distance between each turn is 5 millimeters. So this is the helix that we're going to use to create our bolt and our nut. Actually, the threads. And then we'll use those for the bolt and the nut. Alright, so now we're done with the helix. I'm going to move on to the threads layer. And eventually we're going to be sweeping this helix with the shape of a thread. Now, we're just going to use a basic triangle as our thread, but if you search online for thread angles and such, there's a whole science to creating threads. There's actually the threads on the inside of a bolt, or on the outside of a bolt, and on the inside of a nut are not exactly the same. If they were, there would be too much friction because there'd be they'd basically be the same size. Anyways, it's complicated. So we're not going to get into all that. We're just going to simplify it and use a basic triangle for our threads. So before we draw, it's best when you're sweeping a path that is kind of complicated like this to actually draw the shape in the orientation that you want it to sweep. So I'm going to draw it actually on the end of my helix, and I'm going to draw it perpendicular to that so that I can just tell AutoCAD sweep it in this position along this path. So we're going to get started with just a simple line. You can either choose the line tool or the polyline. Actually, the first thing I need to do is change my UCS. So let's do that. So I'm viewing now. Oh, it says I'm viewing from the top. Did I already change? There we go. That looks more normal. Okay, so I'm going to change my UCS so that I can draw perpendicular to this starting point. So as I orbit, the front view is the one that I want to draw from. So I want to be able to draw flat in this orientation from the front. So I'm going to change my UCS to front. Now the drawing surface is perpendicular to the starting point of my helix, which is what I want. So now I can start drawing. Choose the Polyline Tool. I'm going to click on the end here just to start and draw a line with a unit of 5. So 5, enter. And now I'm going to escape out of this, and I'm going to draw a line starting at the midpoint of the line that I just drew and draw it over 5. Alright, now I'm going to use the endpoints here to create the triangle. So I'm going to choose my Polyline Tool again. I'm going to click here at that endpoint, click here, and click one last time over here. Now I have a triangle. I can get rid of this middle line. Now I need to join these together to create a solid polyline. So move to join, enter. This line with this polyline, enter. Alright, now I'm going to orbit just to make sure that I'm in the right position here. So you want your drawing to look like this. Our triangle is aligned perpendicular to our helix. So this is making it easier for AutoCAD to determine which direction to sweep. So now we have a shape and we want to sweep it along this path. So I'm going to now go to a 3D view here, somewhere I can see solids. So I'm going to go to shaded with edges, and I'm going to go to the solid tab and choose sweep. So I want to sweep this as a solid. I'm going to select the object that I want to sweep, which is this triangle, and press enter. Now there's a few things that we want to choose from the menu back down here. First thing is determining the base point. I want to sweep this actually from the middle of the triangle along this path. So I'm going to choose the base point of this midpoint here. And then the next thing I want to do is tell AutoCAD to not align my object. So alignment, align sweep object perpendicular to path before sweep. I want to choose no because I already aligned my object perpendicular to my drawing before I even started the sweep command. So I did the work for AutoCAD. So I'm going to select no from this menu. So it's not going to try to realign what I've already aligned for it. So I chose the base point, I chose the alignment. Now I'm ready to choose the path that I want to sweep, which is this path here. So I'm going to click, give it a couple seconds, and it should sweep the path. I'm just going to orbit to see. Alright. So here we have our thread pattern, and it was swept correctly. The middle of the helix should be over here somewhere. Let me see if I can hide this real quick. Let me go back to the helix layer, and I'm going to hide the threads. Oh, it actually takes over. So the helix is no longer there. It used the helix and then it disappeared. So that's a good thing to remember. If you wanted to retain your helix before you sweep, you would need to copy it. So that's one step I probably should have done, just in case I can always recreate it, but just in case I wanted to keep it for later. So now I have threads. Now I'm going to model a bolt. So I'm going to go to the bolt layer, cancel, and I know that the overall diameter is 20, so I'm going to have a radius of 10. So I'm simply going to draw a circle. Go back to the World UCS. On circle command again. So the radius again is 10. Then I'm going to extrude this. A height of 100. Now I'm going to move, or actually copy, my helix. Specify a base point. I wanted to find the center if I can. If you can't, then we're going to have to do something like this. So I'm going to click here on the end point of my helix, drag it over and snap it to the end quadrant of my cylinder here. So copied it over. And there's a little problem here. It's a little bit too tall. So I'm just going to click on this, grab the handle, and lower it by half of a turn. So my total turn is 5, so I'm going to lower it 2.5. I'm going to orbit just to make sure this is in the position I want it to be. Alright, so there's a little bit here that's going to be left over that won't be good, and I'll show you in just a second. So if this were a screw, that would interfere with it screwing in. So I'm going to lower it again, 2.5. And that should work out well. Alright, so the next step is to subtract our threads from the bolt. I'm going to choose the object that we're going to keep, which would be the inside cylinder. Enter. And then choose the threads, which is what we're going to subtract from that solid. Press enter. So now we have a bolt with some threads. Now the next step would be to create a nut. So first thing we want to do is a nut has a hexagon as the outer portion of the nut. So I'm going to determine that there's going to be 6 sides. Specify the center, and inscribed, which would be inside the circle, circumscribed would be about the circle. So I want it to be, actually doesn't matter at this point. So I'm going to choose inscribed, and the radius needs to be larger than what I'm going to subtract out of the middle of it. So I'm going to choose a radius of 20. And now I'm going to draw a circle inside that just to represent what the threads are going to be. Okay. I do that in reverse. I'm going to undo that real quick. So let me just create a circle. And actually, let's change layers here. So now we're drawing on the nut layer, and I want a radius of 10. And then I want to create a hexagon. So 6 sides, enter. Choose the base point, which would be the center of this circle. And we're just going to do inscribed. And choose something that looks like the right size here. That looks good. Alright, so I need to now simply extrude this the height that I want the nut to be. So I'm going to press extrude, select my hexagon, enter, and specify a height here. Let's do 15. Alright. Next thing we're going to do is move these threads to the center of my nut. So I'm going to copy the threads over, specify a base point. Again, I'm going to use the end point and then snap it to quadrant of my circle. And escape out of the copy. Oh, that didn't work. I have no idea why my computer's slowing down so much. Glitching. That also did not work. Oh, I see. I have to choose the correct quadrant. That's the one. Alright, let me zoom out and get rid of these extra ones here. And again, I'm going to lower these threads so that it goes all the way through the nut there. And now I'm ready to subtract. Actually, no, this is not a subtract function. I want to add these. So I'm going to need to slice these threads because they're sticking out too far on the top and the bottom. So to slice, I'm going to want to align my UCS to where it looks like I could slice it on this plane. So the front would be a good one to use. So I'm going to change my UCS from world to front. And then I'm going to go to the solid tab and choose slice. I want to slice this object. Enter. Specify a starting point. I'm just going to click here and then draw a straight line across. Specify a point on the desired side. I want to keep this side over here. So I need to go through that process one more time. Slice this object here. Enter. This time I want to choose this plane. From here, straight line over. Specify a point on desired side. So here I need to orbit to be able to click on this side over here. Alright, so now I have my threads in the right position, but I need to create a hole there, and that's where that circle is going to come into play. So I have a circle here that I'm going to extrude. I'm going to click here, extrude. Doesn't matter how tall, but I'm purposely going to make it taller than my nut so it's easy to select it. I want to subtract from this hexagon this cylinder. Enter. So I'm left with these two solids, one for the outside of the nut and the other for the inside threads. So now I want to union these two together. So with solids, you can union, subtract, or intersect. Union combines solids. Surf sculpting also does, and I actually prefer surf sculpting because you can union two solids even if they're not touching, which is kind of confusing. But in this instance, these two are actually touching, so I can use the union command. Enter. So now this looks a little bit strange because our threads are pretty thick for the size that they are, but this is actually a model of a nut and a bolt. What we need now to create on the top of our bolt will be another hexagon. So I'm going to go back to the Home tab and choose the bolt layer. And now we're going to draw another hexagon. 6 sides. Choose the center. It's not allowing me to select that, so shift right click, center. Then we used inscribed before, and it was a radius of 20, I think. That looks about right. Now we're going to extrude this. Height of 15. And let's join these two together. So that would be union. Okay, so there you have it. We've got our bolts, our threads, and our nut. For some reason the nut where the threads moved to the wrong layer. So let's go ahead and do this, and then lay cur, this nut to the nut layer. There we go.